Hello and welcome to this special edition of GreenFleet Talks, where we'll be focusing on commercial vehicles. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today, and I'm delighted to be joined by Keith Shorter, Head of Van and Trucks at Europcar. Hi Keith.
Hi Kate, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem at all.
Keith, we are focusing on commercial vehicles for this GreenFleet Talks. Everyone is talking about sustainability and the transition to net zero. But what does that really mean in practice for commercial fleet operators from your perspective?
In essence, the headline is reducing your carbon footprint and making your fleet more viable as well as sustainable. Beyond that, it just in daily operation, it's actually the sustainability of the business model as well that runs behind that, Kate. So we can't just, a lot of businesses can't just completely move to a greener policy very quickly for many reasons we'll discuss today, I'm sure. But it's around about that beginning of the move away from ice and fossil fuels, while the business their business is sustainable in the background for costs and operational restrictions, as well as obviously trying to go green and do the right thing for the environment as well.
Yeah, Keith, I had a conversation last week which started with if money was no object, because ultimately, you know, we have this. We know that we have to transition. And it's balancing the commercial with the viable technology, isn't it? So, what are you seeing as the big challenges for commercial fleet managers, and how are they making a difference in their sustainability targets?
I think the biggest thing that the commercial industry is doing is using tools such as we provide in Fleet Tools to better route plan, try and lower fuel consumption, as well as reduce their road journeys. So it's not always about having how much an unlimited pot of money, because sometimes there isn't a viable option to change. So some of the practices for sustainability are around in the planning and the actual general operation, and whether that is a hub and spoke model to reduce road journeys, whether that is a change in the way they do their logistics. But we give them the evaluation tools to help make that decision at the right point. So I think that's in a nutshell.
Okay, and I'm going. Let's just chat about that, Keith, because how certainly driving efficiency within your existing fleet operation is your starter for 10, isn't it? Because you don't necessarily want to transition a vehicle to zero emission if actually you don't need that vehicle at all. But how far will that actually get a fleet on that journey? And are fleets successfully doing this already?
Yes, fleets are successfully doing it. It's in terms of they can make areas of their business sustainable quite easily, and that is obviously the change in the route planning and change in the road journeys, but also transitioning across to hybrid or greener vehicles, or across to EV, plug-in hybrids, etc. So that is possible for certain areas of their business already, and there are certain areas that still remain a challenge to do that, where the availability of a suitable fleet isn't with us yet in the sector.
Okay, and I noticed from your job title that you're Van and Trucks.
Yes.
Two kind of different beasts in this whole discussion.
Yes, my concentration in the UK is on LCV, where other elements of our group do run HGVs as well. We're really conscious that as payloads are required and ranges are required in the LCV arena, as we transition to electric, that we will run larger vehicles in future, just to maintain that usability of a vehicle. But at the moment, our main focus is on LCV in the UK.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things that we talk about quite regularly on GreenFleet, and we've done a lot of work on before, is clean air and low emission zones. So they're springing up across the country, and it does appear, and it makes sense, that they're targeting commercial vehicles ahead of passenger vehicles. Not in all cases, because each town or city can dictate their own approach. But do you think the businesses that you're talking to, do you think they fully understand the implication of what's happening here?
Yes and no. And it's a very mixed picture, Kate. I think where the larger corporates that we deal with may have their own sustainability department, or procurement is very aware, and they'll have their own internal policies and published policies. I think then they are prepared and they are making the moves in time. But we still see in the SME world some last minute changes where their fleet aren't meeting requirements, and we can step in and assist. So I think it's the difference between more of that corporate sector and that public awareness and the large sustainability focus that comes with a large business, where maybe not so much in the smaller operators that we work with, where it's a little bit more unscheduled, unplanned. So that's when we try and step in and assist them with that journey.
I think it's a real challenge for these small businesses, because to be able to monitor what's happening across dozens of cities in the UK, who are all taking a slightly different approach, is really challenging. But also, if you're an SME that's based in a specific region, it could impact 100% of your vehicles.
Yes, especially whether you're actually just inside or just outside of the edge of the zones has a big difference on whether you can register and run the vehicles longer or be given time. But likewise with the big corporate operators, as you touched on there, Kate, they're running to a whole different set of rules if they operate nationally. So it's not one city rule is exactly the same as the others with the zones A, B, C, D, etc. So I think whereas what has assisted maybe is the transition to EV cars and to greener fleet, battery plug-in hybrids, where many of the company directors are now running those vehicles, even at SME level themselves, so that they're more aware of their technology and what it can and it can't do, but they're also more aware of what is out there and what is available. Obviously, the van and truck world is still catching up in that respect at the moment in terms of choice. So. Yeah,
and you may not know the answer to this, but your branches that are based in these cities that are operating clean air zone or low emission zones, have they seen an impact on this in terms of demand for their vehicles?
Yes, definitely, and that's been part of our sustainability drive as we electrify our network as well, Kate, that we're going to concentrate the vehicles and the charging infrastructure in our own sites closest to those zones, because it makes sense. I read a figure the other day that with the new expanded ULEZ, that 83,000 vans a day no longer meet the requirement. So obviously that's going to drive a wholesale change in modernising fleet. Obviously, in the UK, with our clean air zones, we haven't gone to zero emission zones like some of our European partners. So the drive isn't legislation still to come out of a diesel, as long as it's so we always have the latest, cleanest versions of the vehicles on our fleet, and we run a relatively young fleet. So we can assist without having to make that whole transition across. But it's the start of the conversation and it's the start of the roadmap.
And I think you've made, Keith, quite a good distinction there, because if it's a new diesel, then it's probably Euro 6 compliant, which at the moment for most of the clean air zones is good enough. But you're right, if it was to move to truly zero emission, then anything diesel is a challenge.
Yeah, and we've seen that. Not to touch on, we're concentrating on the UK, but within our group, obviously we're 140 countries. We see every kind of implication. But in Western Europe and up in Scandinavia, we're seeing the legislation with zero emission zones in Madrid, etc., rolled across Spain now, and government legislation in Denmark and the Scandinavian countries forcing that move, because a percentage of your fleet has to go immediately to zero emissions to be able to operate in the cities. So.
Yeah. Interesting times. I part of me thinks the sooner the better, but equally, doing it city by city at least gives you some respite. Keith, for Europcar, how are you helping commercial fleet managers understand the real world impact of EVs?
Okay, so it's a mixture of transition consultation from our sales teams, backed by MI data as well. So we can have that sensible conversation, and it's not just literally about the vehicle. The vehicle is only one part of a transition. There are many things that a customer has to consider: their own charging infrastructure, the public charging infrastructure, the home charging, even down to their own HR contracts, where the staff are allowed to take vehicles home or not take vehicles home, or where they would like them to be recharged overnight or in daily operations. So we have EV charge cards available, and we can assist with guidance on other parts of the equation, not just the vehicle. So that's our stance, because it's not just going from one ICE vehicle to another ICE vehicle. It's a whole ethos change in the company that's required as well.
And the risk is, of course, if you just at their request, if you give them, for example, a battery electric van, without giving them the tools for refueling it, then they're not going to thank you in the short term.
Yes, we do try before you buy as well, Kate. So we've run that successfully through 2022 with some of our existing customers. So different models available to them to try to see. So that aids the conversation. So it's not just our words saying the data says this; it's ready to change. Obviously, there are different vehicles perform differently in the winter, under payload, under with extra drivers, etc. So actually, real-world tests for our customers is the route we've gone immediately.
Keith, I'm really interested when you do try before you buy, because we know that there are a lot of fleets who are still hesitant about adopting this technology. Of the ones who do the try before you buy, what's the split between those who hand the keys back and say, no, still not right yet, versus those who say, perform much better than we were expecting, we love it?
It's a mixture on the size of the vehicle. It's a mixture on the technology in the vehicle, Kate, is the honest answer. In terms of the desire, the driving of the product, etc., how the vehicle performs in actual the ease of moving across, that's always very well received. In terms of range and payload is where the objections start to rise, which I understand. However, when we step people into hybrid vehicles, which we run on our fleet, the retention's been much higher, because they can still do a battery only range of 45-50 miles, but they've still got that backup of another 250 miles of range extension motor. So that has worked quite well for us, and that is something that we're looking at, obviously, with some of the new products coming online, with the plug-in electric vans and the hybrids, as well as the full transition to EV. In terms of categories, the smaller vans perform better than the larger vans at the moment. So that's a more viable step.
Well, I think you've part answered my next question, Keith, because I am interested in how you see the market transitioning to zero emissions. So, and I won't hold you to this, but what are the OEMs telling you? What are you expecting is coming down the line, and what are your customers planning in terms of the transition?
I think however we do it is going to be a migrated transition. There's never going to be a wholesale switch from one technology to the other. That's going to be around infrastructure, but it's also around the products that are available on the market today. And there are just areas of the industry that we're civil engineering, construction, etc., that we're heavily into, where towing is an issue, where payload is an issue, where distance is an issue as well. So those on that scale of the industry have got one eye on not just EV and plug-in, but also on hydrogen coming down the line as well, which I think will creep into the HGV world first. So those OEMs that manufacture both HGV and LCV in that marketplace will obviously have their own stance on where they're going, but we're keeping a close eye on that. In terms of the pure EV side or the zero emissions vehicles, then there's not going to be a wholesale change until the new technology arrives on the Gen 6-7 batteries, maybe 4 years before we start to see those ranges extend out to 400, 500 miles realistically. Obviously, you've got to take away, that's WLTP, you take away payload, you take away winter conditions, cold weather, that comes down to what's more usable for the wider industry on average mileages. So in the meantime, I think it will be national operators that operate in cities and rural will take their urban vehicles across, and predominantly in the small van and mid-sized van section.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful, and I think your point about WLTP, LTP, and payload having an impact on this is key. Although part of me thinks that there will be another objection around the corner. Once those challenges are solved, there'll be something else. You did touch on infrastructure, I think. Yeah,
we're on the BVDRA EV work group, where I think it's widely accepted that WLTP isn't the correct measure for an EV vehicle. So I know the government are looking at some other form of grading in the future, and hopefully that taking in consistent payload, weather conditions, etc. So hopefully that will be with us in the near future.
Oh, very interesting. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that, Keith. And finally, then let's talk about Europcar. How is Europcar playing its part in supporting commercial fleet managers?
In commercial fleet managers in general, we have our telematics so that are available for the MI data, not just for transition, but for everyday best practice and use. We have safety dash cameras, forward-facing, rear-facing cameras options. We have the fuel card options that we can assist with. We are increasingly supporting on our fleet services department. So it's longer than 28 days duration, but we're working a lot closer than we ever have done in the past with our customers in support and information. Dedicated account managers, a long-term customer support team that is just there for them. And we're doing our part to reduce emissions as well with them from our side, not just them. So we're now able to use our network so we can book servicing and MOTs if required and maintenance on a ramp at a certain time. So a customer hasn't got to come in, unload the vehicle, take another courtesy vehicle, etc. We can actually book them a dedicated time slot now to have in their working day around them. So that
it's a while you wait service.
Yeah, while you wait. So it reduces their journeys back to one of our sites. It reduces replacement vehicles and fuel, etc. Likewise, our network is, we have a network now of 13 super sites across the UK, which are dedicated to van and truck, as well as another 53 sites that provide van and truck, especially vans. But the larger sites have the professional centres there with people absolutely that you can talk to about payload, towing. We work with our fleet departments now on every conceivable extra you can put on a vehicle. So from the fit out of that vehicle right the way through to a pre-built Chapter 8 fleet now. So they are ready to go, vehicles for traffic management, for highways, for construction, for civils, are ready to go in the yards, pre-built to a standard that meets their requirements. So we're trying to assist in as many ways as we can. We still like the face-to-face approach, Kate. Although you can have automated booking, you can have someone live to talk to, and the relationships that our customers build with our local super sites and stations is still very important to us.
Well, there's obviously stacks going on, Keith. You got visibly excited talking about your super centres,
Yes, indeed.
and I hope they've got a lot of EV charging capabilities,
Yes,
or will have in the future.
yes.
Keith, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Sadly, that's all we've got time for. Thank you for joining GreenFleet Talks.
No problem, Kate. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And thank you to our audience for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.